Picture this. You just got a raise. Nothing life-changing, just enough that, for once, you feel like you're actually gaining ground. And quietly, you promise yourself, this is the month you finally save more. You mean it too. Then Friday rolls around, and somehow you talk yourself into an upgrade. A nicer dinner, new shoes. Maybe you finally sign the lease on that apartment with the extra room. You worked hard. You earned it. What's the point of money if you never let yourself feel it? Now picture a different family down the street. There's no tension around money in that house, not the way there is in yours. And it's not because they make more. Sometimes they make less. It's that their whole relationship to money is different, quieter, almost boring, honestly, in a way that's hard to describe. That gap isn't luck. It's not even really about how much either of you has today. It's something underneath that. Something most of us were never taught, never handed down, never even told existed. That's what I want to get into today. Here's the story most of us absorbed without ever questioning it. Rich families stay rich because they started ahead. A head start passed down, while the rest of us run a race that was rigged before the gun went off. There's a grain of truth in that. Starting with more is an advantage. Nobody's arguing otherwise. But here's what surprises people the first time they hear it. Researchers who track family wealth across generations keep landing on the same strange number. Somewhere around 70% of wealthy families lose the fortune by the second generation. By the third, it's worse. There's an old saying for it, and versions of it show up in cultures that never talk to each other. Shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. One generation builds it. The next one spends it. The third grows up having never built anything. And it doesn't collapse with a headline. It just quietly evaporates. If inheriting money guaranteed keeping it, this pattern couldn't exist, but it does. Over and over. Which tells you something. The money was never really the thing being handed down. Something else was. And that something is rare enough that most families, no matter what they earn in a lifetime, never actually get their hands on it. So if you've ever felt behind, like everyone else just gets money in a way you don't, let that go for a second. Nobody explained this to you. It's not taught in school, and it's barely taught at home. Because most households are busy surviving this month, not planning 3 generations out. You were never bad with money. You were never handed the blueprint. So let's actually look at what's in it. Old money families. And I mean families who've held on to it for 50, 80, 100 years. Not people who just happen to have money right now. They think about money on a completely different wavelength. Most of us treat money as something we have. Earn it. Hold it a while. Spend it. It's yours. End of story. Old money treats it more like something you've been trusted with for a while. Not mine to enjoy, mine to protect, and hand off in better shape than I found it. That one shift, from ownership to stewardship, quietly rewires almost every decision built on top of it. Think about what that does day to day. If money's yours to enjoy, spending it feels like a reward. You worked. You earned it. You deserve to feel it. And that feeling is real. I'm not knocking it. But if you're stewarding money for people who don't exist yet, future you, your kids, grandkids you'll never meet, spending starts carrying a bit more weight. Not guilt. Just wait. A quiet question shows up before you buy something. Is this going to matter in 20 years? Or does it just feel good right now? Simple question. Not a simple answer. Most of our money decisions get made on how something feels in the moment, not how it plays out over decades. And that's not a flaw in you. It's just how brains work. We react to what's immediate. A paycheck hitting your account feels real. A retirement account 30 years out barely registers as real at all. Rent's due this month. Groceries are due this week. The future stays optional. Right up until it isn't. This is usually where people hear delayed gratification and roll their eyes, because it sounds like something printed under a stock photo of a sunrise. But the math underneath it is real, and it's worth slowing down for, because once you actually see it, you can't unsee it. Say you put $10,000 into something growing around 7% a year on average, roughly in line with long-term market history. No guarantees. Plenty of bumps along the way. 10 years in, that 10,000 is around 20,000. Kind of underwhelming for a decade of waiting, honestly. But here's what old money families seem to get instinctively. 20 years in, it's not 40,000. It's closer to 50. 30 years in, it's past 70,000. The line doesn't stay straight. It bends, slowly at first, then faster. Because eventually, you're not just earning on your original money anymore. You're earning on your earnings. That's compound interest. Plain and simple. And most of us never feel its power. Because we quit right before the curve gets interesting. Save for a year or two. Get discouraged that the number barely moved. Stop. Meanwhile, families who've done this for generations aren't looking at year 2. They're barely looking at year 20. They're thinking year 60, 80, 100. Money that outlives whoever set it aside in the first place. There's a psychological piece here too, and it might be the biggest one. In a lot of old money households, wealth stays quiet, understated, to the point of invisible. You won't necessarily see it in the driveway or the closet. That's not an accident. It's a value. Taught like anything else, because the second your identity gets tied to how your money looks to other people, you spend the rest of your life reacting to their eyes, instead of running your own plan. New money, the kind that just showed up, through a promotion, a windfall, a lucky break, usually carries a hunger to prove itself, that it's real, that it's earned, that it belongs. And that hunger gets expensive fast. A bigger house than the family needs. A car that loses value the second it leaves the lot. A vacation on a credit card because the photos need to happen this year. Budget. Or no budget. Old money doesn't need to prove anything. Because the money was never the identity in the first place. Their sense of who they are doesn't come from a number in an account somewhere. It comes from something closer to shared discipline, shared patience, quiet agreements that get discussed at dinner, the way other families talk about the game, or the neighbors. And that's really the whole thing, right there. Not a secret account, not some hidden formula, a family operating system. The questions asked before a big purchase. How a teenager gets walked through opening their first savings account. The shared expectation that you build the cushion before you build the lifestyle. None of it requires millions to install. It requires one decision, made early, repeated so many times, it stops feeling like a decision and starts feeling like just who you are. Now compare that to how most of us actually learn about money. We learn by watching stress. We watch a parent open a bill and go quiet a second too long. We hear, we can't afford that, and never hear why. Never hear what the plan is. We don't inherit a system. We inherit anxiety. And then we're expected to build a whole financial life on top of it. Usually alone. Usually while the world keeps insisting, we need one more thing before we're finally enough. There's a time anxiety piece too, worth saying out loud, because I think a lot of us feel it and never actually say it. That quiet dread, that we're already behind, that everyone else figured this out years ago, that the runway's running out. Old money families don't feel less of that pressure because they're calmer people. They feel less of it because their family already answered the "when do we start?" question generations back. Their clock started before they were born. For the rest of us, the clock starts the day we decide it does. which, once you sit with it, is actually kind of freeing. The starting line isn't behind you. It's wherever you plant it. So if you've quietly decided you're just bad with money, I want to push back on that. You're not bad with money. You were handed a paycheck, a pile of pressure, and told to figure out the rest yourself. That's not a personal failure. That's a missing blueprint. And here's where it actually turns. Because once you get that old money was never really about the money. It's about the system underneath it. Something useful clicks into place. You don't need a trust fund to install that system. You don't need to be born into it. You just need to be the one who decides to start it. Sit with that for a second. Every old money family, no matter how far back the story goes, had a first generation. One person who decided, for whatever reason, to think in decades instead of days. They didn't inherit that mindset either. They built it, probably slower and messier than the family legend lets on, probably full of doubt along the way, and they passed it down. Not through a will, not through a lawyer's office, but through conversation, habit, the way they reacted the one time money got tight, or the one time it showed up out of nowhere. Which means, wherever you're standing right now, however far behind you feel, that's not disqualifying. It's just a starting point. The real question was never, how much did I inherit? It's, what am I going to install right now that someone after me actually inherits? And once that clicks, decisions genuinely start to feel different. Not because you suddenly have more money. You might not. Not yet. But because you're not deciding from anxiety anymore. You're deciding from something closer to patience. There's a real, felt difference between spending because you're scared you'll never have enough, and spending because you've already built a foundation solid enough that a little enjoyment doesn't threaten it. The first one is exhausting. It never resolves, because the fear was never really about the number. It was about not having a plan. The second one is quiet. It doesn't need to prove anything, not even to yourself. That's what old money families actually have, that most of us don't. Not more zeros, more peace. And peace travels across generations, in a way a lump sum of cash never quite manages on its own. So, what does this look like if you're starting from zero, with no family fortune behind you? Smaller than you'd think, almost uncomfortably small, because we assume generational change needs something dramatic, a big investment, a business, a windfall that changes everything overnight. It doesn't. It usually starts with something as unglamorous as a small emergency fund, a few months of expenses, sitting somewhere safe, doing nothing exciting whatsoever. That fund's not there to make you rich. It's there so one bad month, a car repair, a medical bill, a slow stretch at work, doesn't knock the whole plan back into panic. Old money families rarely talk about this part out loud, but it's the floor everything else sits on. Hard to think in decades, when you're one flat tire from a crisis. From there, it's consistency over intensity, setting aside even a little, regularly, automatically, so it doesn't run on willpower every month. The number matters way less than people think. What matters is that it happens without you having to decide, over and over. Because decisions we have to keep remaking are decisions we eventually stop making. It also means talking about money differently, especially around kids, not with fear, not with the kind of secrecy that makes it feel shameful to even bring it up at the table. Just normally, the way old money households tend to. Matter of fact, the same way you talk about anything else. That actually matters to the family. Kids don't need every number in the account, but they benefit from watching how decisions get made. Hearing, we're saving for this because, instead of only ever hearing, We can't afford that. And maybe the biggest shift, the question you ask right before you buy something, even something small, not, can I afford this right now? Almost anything feels affordable in the moment. When you're just tapping a card, the better question, the one old money households seem to ask, without even thinking about it, is, will this still matter to me a year from now? Sometimes the honest answer is yes. That's fine. This was never about never enjoying your money. It's about making sure enjoyment is a choice, not a reflex. None of this needs extreme discipline or giving up everything you like today for a future that isn't guaranteed. It's not about cutting every small pleasure out of your life or feeling guilty over a cup of coffee. It's slower than that. And honestly, more sustainable because of it. Old money wasn't built in one white-knuckled generation of sacrifice. It was built by people who decided the family's habits mattered more than any single purchase. Then let time do the rest of the work. Quietly, in the background, while life kept going. Go back to the start. You, holding a raise, deciding whether to save it or spend it. That family down the street, calm about money, in a way you couldn't quite explain. Here's what I hope sticks. That calm was never something they were simply born into. It's a system built by someone, at some point, who decided to think a little further out than felt natural in the moment. And systems can be built by anyone, including you, including right now. Wherever you're starting from, you don't need to fix your whole financial life this week. You don't need a dramatic before and after story. You just need to be willing to be the first generation of something. The first in your family, or the first version of yourself, who asks the quieter question before spending. Who lets a small amount grow untouched instead of grabbing it early? Who talks about money without fear instead of talking around it? Not a fast path. It was never supposed to be, but it's a real one. And 100 small, unremarkable decisions, repeated long enough, will outlast one dramatic one. Every time. You're not behind. You're just early in a story that hasn't finished writing itself. And that part? The part where you actually get to decide what happens next. That's the good news buried under all of it. So that's it for today. I'm Sophia. If you want to hold on to your hard-earned money and actually build something with it, hit subscribe. There's a lot more of this coming. Thanks for watching.